thumbs its nose at volume brands who've abandoned the city car segment and brings us one here, the Aygo Cross. But it's a city car with a bit more pavement presence than those you might be used to. In terms of the statement it'll make at the gym, it's a world away from the old Aygo. Plus, it's economical, promises to be fun to drive, and can even be had in semi-convertible form. Trendsetters should form an orderly queue.
Ever since we first saw the Aygo back in 2005, one thing has been common about it: the little 1-litre 3-cylinder petrol engine beneath the bonnet. The technicalities of modern powertrain development have passed this unit by, but nevertheless, it reappears again here, thrummy and relatively feeble as ever, but still quite sufficient for the needs of a city car weighing less than a tonne. You might have expected this Aygo Cross model switch to the underpinnings of a 4th generation Yaris to yield up that supermini's frugal 1.5-litre hybrid engine, which will fit but will never be required to because it would add 50% both to weight and price. It feels like heresy to say it in these days of evangelical battery power, but cars this cheap don't need electrification and shouldn't have it until that apparently far-off day when the industry works out how to provide such a thing at a price that younger people and lower-paid workers can afford. Given that the pricing of this Aygo Cross is already stretching the limits in that regard, you can understand why Toyota chose to equip it with an engine 2 decades old, finessed for emissions over the earliest models, Daihatsu-derived 1KR unit, but otherwise hardly much different. It's certainly not much faster, available only with 71 bhp and a puny 93 Nm of pulling power that makes you thankful for the lightweight underpinnings. The high biting point of the 5-speed manual version most will choose means that lots of revs are needed to avoid stalling when setting off, and for the same reason reversing uphill can be a little clutch cremating if you're not careful. But the shifter has a nice short throw, and if you're quick with it, the car feels nippy in its urban jungle habitat, which is actually illusory because it's not really very fast at all. 62 miles an hour from rest is quoted at 14.9 seconds for the manual version we're trying here, but on the open road it manages to feel slower even than that figure suggests, straining its way up to the kind of double-digit top speed, 98 miles an hour, that you might have thought was reserved for either your dad's 60s saloon or a modern EV. For the alternative CVT automatic model, which somehow feels more leisurely still, the figures are 14.8 seconds and 94 miles an hour. Not that any of this really matters much. As we've suggested, the Aygo Cross is fun to jink about in town. And fun too if you take the twisty way back from the school run, thanks to well-weighted steering, tremendous traction and excellent body control. It doesn't even fall apart as an ownership proposition where you'd expect it to on the odd highway-based longer trip, thanks to the decent ride and refinement that settles down quite a lot once you get on a major road and moderate your right foot. The move to a crossover theme hasn't delivered any rough road prowess, of course, but the 11mm increase in ride height might make the odd urban speed hump a little less daunting. You can't profitably sell a car of this size without substantial economies of scale, which in this case were provided by a switch to the TNGA GAB chassis used by the 4th generation Yaris and Yaris Cross models. Inserting a platform originally developed for a supermini meant a step up in size, of course, but the dimensional upgrade is modest. The Aygo Cross measuring in 3.7 metres long and 1.74 metres wide, which makes it 235mm longer and 125mm wider than its more conventional predecessor. It's 50mm taller too, which is important to emphasise a crossover vibe, underlined by thick plastic wheel arch cladding, an 11mm rise in ride height, a prominent front skid plate and colour-contrasted flared wheel arch surrounds, shrouding larger 17 or 18-inch alloy rims. You can specify a fabric roll-top roof as well. Right, time to take a look inside. The previous Aygo's cabin claimed to be funky, but wasn't. This is much better. Hard plastic still abound, of course, across the bold, playful dash design, but that's okay in this class of car, as is the exposed metalwork on the door tops. It helps that you sit higher than you'd usually expect to in a city car, 55mm higher than in the old model, and your view out is further aided by a raked back A-pillar. It feels more spacious too, thanks to the way these front seats have been set 20mm further apart, increasing shoulder space by 45mm as part of the shared interaction cabin design. And assuming you've splashed out a bit on trim choice, there'll be more than a touch of colour interior highlights matching the spicy exterior shades to give the dashboard and the centre console a distinctive look. Embellished, of course, with screen tech, though you won't get one this big unless you end up spending an awful lot more than you'd originally intended to on your Aygo Cross. This is Toyota's freshly developed 9-inch HD Smart Connect setup with cloud-based navigation, over-the-air updates, wireless smartphone connectivity and the option of a JBL premium sound system. The Aygo Cross enjoys a wheelbase length increase of 90mm on its predecessor, but it's pretty clear, even before you get in, that this hasn't done much for rear seat space. The door aperture is restricted to the point where it won't be that easy for parents to lean in and strap up offspring. And once you get inside, things aren't much better. Yes, of course, cars of this kind are always going to be small at the back, but models like Kia's Picanto have shown that it's possible to do better than this. And averagely sized adults will almost certainly need cooperation from those ahead to be able to sit in any way comfortably, and the headrests are of the sort that dig uncomfortably into your shoulder until you raise them. Worse, there are only 2 seats back here. Rival Kia Picanto and Fiat Panda Cross models find space for 3. And the windows don't open conventionally. You can only angle them out using these catches. At least things are a little better out back. Well, assuming you don't mind this super high loading lip anyway, caused because Toyota has persisted with the previous model's cost-saving trick of not providing a tailgate, fitting a lifting glass panel instead. There's a deep cargo area that's 231 litres in size, 60 litres more than you got in the previous generation model. You'd want a car of this kind to be economical, and sure enough, the Aygo Cross is capable of up to 58.8 mpg on the combined cycle while emitting up to 109 grams per kilometre of CO2. Those figures apply to both manual and CVT auto variants. Toyota reckon these efficiency readings are competitive with mild hybrid rivals, which is accurate. A mild hybrid Suzuki Ignis manages 56.9 mpg and 112 grams per kilometre. And the brand thinks that the Aygo Cross stats we've quoted are good enough to make unnecessary the introduction of an electrified version of this car. The key here, according to Toyota, is to keep this model affordable and provide a combustion vehicle small car option for urban folk who don't have access to charging points. Toyota describes this as the first true urban crossover, a claim which will be controversial to owners of cars like Suzuki's Ignis and Fiat's Panda Cross. But these are older designs, and this one offers a bit more visual pizzazz than the only other crossover option in the city car segment, Kia's Picanto Cross line. Yes, the Aygo Cross is quite feebly powered, but on a car of this kind, that matters less than Toyota's ambitious pricing here, something that makes upper spec variants like this one difficult to justify. And even by city car standards, it's very cramped in the back. On the plus side, though, you get a completely new standard of safety tech for a car of this kind, one that would embarrass most superminis from the next class up. And this car's fashionable vibe is as trendy as a car like this needs to be. As a result, we could see the Aygo Cross selling quite well and embarrassing other brands who've abandoned this sector. Not everyone who wants a really small car can afford a small EV. And if you fit into this category, this funky little Toyota represents quite an appealing option. So, the city car segment isn't dead after all. It just needed a different approach.